We've distinguished three different views as to the secret or key to personal identity across time. There's the soul view, the body view, and the personality view. Putting aside, for the most part, the soul view because I've argued that there are no souls, although occasionally I bring it out just for the sake of comparison and contrast. The main question we want to ask ourselves is how to choose between the body view and the personality view. The body view says, follow the body. If somebody around in the future has got my body, that's me. The personality view says, follow the personality. That is the set of beliefs, desires, memories, goals, ambitions, and so forth. Somebody around in the future that's got my memories, my beliefs, my desires, that's me. How should we choose between these two views? As I mentioned at the end of last lecture, what I want to do is offer us a set of thought experiments. They've got to be thought experiments because in real life, bodies and personalities go hand in hand. But by doing some science fiction experiments, we can take them apart and ask ourselves, well, which one do I think is me? When my body goes one way and my personality goes another way, where do I go? And again, just to remind you, in order to get the intuitions actually flowing, what I'm going to do once I've separated the body and the personality in this way is torture one of the end products. And so I'm going to be asking you to sort of put yourself in the first person, imagine this is happening to you, and ask yourself, which one do I want to be tortured? Or which one do I want to not be tortured? Because that will give you some kind of evidence as to which one you take to be you. And think about this in that kind of special first-person, ego-concerned way that comes naturally to us. Just bracket any moral concerns you may have about torturing other people or agreeing that somebody else should be tortured. For our purposes, right now, if I brought up a volunteer from the class and I'm asking you, here's you, there's the other volunteer, which one do you want to be tortured? Well, it's let that one be tortured. Don't let it happen to me. That's how we know, this is me speaking. All right, so that's the question I'm going to ask you. I'll probably slip into talking about this experiment as though it's being done to me, but to get it vivid, you should think of it as though it's being done to you. And I'll mention just in passing that these thought experiments that I'm about to give, I'm going to give a pair of them, come from Bernard Williams. He was a British philosopher. All right, so case number one, here you are. The mad scientist has kidnapped you, and he says, I've been working on mind transfer machines, and what I'm going to do is, I've got you, and I've also kidnapped somebody else over here, Linda, and I'm going to hook you up to my machines and swap your minds. And what that means is I'm going to sort of read off the memories and the beliefs and the desires from your brain, and read off the memories and desires and beliefs from Linda's brain. And then I'm going to electronically transfer Linda's memories and beliefs and so forth over here and implant them onto this brain, and take your memories and beliefs and so forth and implant them onto Linda's brain. And so, first we'll put you to sleep, and when we do all this procedure, and then when you wake up, you will wake up in Linda's body. There'll be something here that you'll wake up and you'll say, what am I doing in this new body? What happened to my beard? How come I'm speaking in this high female voice? Whatever it is, but you'll think to yourself, well, here I am, Shelley Kagan. I seem to be inhabiting Linda's body. Don't know how that happened. Oh yes, the mad scientist kidnapped me, and he transferred us, he swapped us. He swapped our bodies, swapped our minds. I guess the whole thing works. So the mad scientist explains all this to you, but in order to sort of give it a little kicker, because he's also an evil mad scientist, that may be evil already, but because he's an evil mad scientist, he says, and then when I'm done, So over here we've got Shelley's body, but Linda's personality. So Linda thinking, what am I doing? And what am I doing in Shelley's body? How did I get a beard? Right? So over here, Linda in Shelley's body. Over here, Shelley in Linda's body. I'm going to torture one of these. But because I'm a generous, evil, mad scientist, I want to ask you, which one should I torture? Now, when I think about this, and again, I'm inviting you to think about this in the first person as though this is happening to you. When I think about this, I say, torture the one over here. I'm going to be over here in Linda's body, horrified at what's been going on, horrified that she's being tortured, but, at least it's not happening to me. That's the intuition I've got when I think about this case. When the mad scientist asks me, which one of these two should I torture? I say, torture this one. Because if I were to say, torture this one, and then he does it, think about what's going to happen. I'll be thinking, I'm Shelley Kagan, oh, this is what a horrible situation. Oh, the pain, stop the pain, make it go away. I don't want that to happen to me. If this one's being tortured, nobody's thinking to himself, oh, I'm Shelley Kagan in horrible pain. So I want this one to be tortured. All right, that's the intuition I've got about the case. Now, if you've got that same intuition, think about the implications of that intuition. You're saying that I, Shelley Kagan, ended up over here. But that's not my body. This is Linda's body. Shelley Kagan's old body is over here. But this is the one that's me, because this is the one that I don't want to have tortured. So the body isn't the key to personal identity. Personality is the key to personal identity. This has got my personality, my memories of growing up in Chicago, becoming a philosopher, my thoughts about what I want to have happen to my children, my fears about how I'm going to explain what's going on to my wife, whatever it is. This is the Shelley Kagan personality over here. This is me. That follows then that this intuition suggests that what I find intuitively plausible is the personality theory of personal identity. Now let's tell a different story. Both of these stories, as I say, come from Bernard Williams. Bernard Williams says, here's another example we can think about. Mad scientist, again, kidnaps Linda. And he says, Shelley, I got some news for you. I say I'm switching between you and me. He says, Shelley, I've got some news for you. I'm going to torture you. I say, no, please don't do it to me. Please don't torture me. He says, well, I'm in the mad scientist business. This is what I do. I'm going to torture you. He says, but because I'm a generous mad scientist, before I torture you, what I'm going to do is give you amnesia. I'm going to completely scrub clean your brain so that you won't remember that you're Shelley Kagan. You won't have any memories of growing up in Chicago. You won't have any memories of deciding to become a philosopher. You won't remember getting married or having children. You won't remember you won't have any desire. The whole thing wiped clean, complete, perfect amnesia before I torture you. Don't you feel better? No, I don't feel better. I'm still going to be tortured, and now we've added sort of insult to injury. I've got amnesia as well as being tortured. No comfort there. Well, he says, look, I'll make the deal sweeter for you. After I give you amnesia, before I torture you, I will drive you insane and make you believe that you're Linda. I've been studying Linda, there she is. I've been reading her psychology by looking at her brain waves and so forth and so on. And so I'm going to delude you into thinking that you're Linda. I'm going to make you think, oh, I'm Linda. Well, you won't talk like that. Oh, I'm Linda. And you'll have the memories of Linda of growing up in Pennsylvania, and you'll remember Linda's family, and like Linda, you'll want to be an author or whatever it is that Linda wants to be. And then I'll torture you. Are you happy now? No, I'm not happy now. First of all, I'm being tortured. I was given amnesia. Now you've driven me crazy and deluded me into thinking that I'm Linda. No comfort there. He says, oh, okay, last attempt to make, you're not being very reasonable. He says, last attempt, I'm going to, after I drive you crazy, make you think you're Linda, I'm going to do the corresponding thing for Linda. I'm going to give her amnesia, and then I'm going to drive her crazy and make her think that she's Shelley, give her all of your memories and beliefs and desires. Now is it okay that I'm going to torture you? No. It hardly makes it, it was bad enough I was being tortured and given amnesia and driven insane. It doesn't really make it any better that you're also going to give amnesia and drive insane somebody else. Don't torture me. If you've got to torture somebody, I say in my non-ethical mood, if you've got to torture somebody, do it to her. Don't do it to me. When I think about this second case, that's my intuition. Now think about the implications of this second case for the theory of personal identity. If I don't want this thing over here to be tortured, that must be because I think it's me. But if it's me, what's the key to personal identity? Well, not personality, because after all, this doesn't end up with Shelley Kagan's personality before the torture. Shelley Kagan's personality is over there. This is Shelley Kagan's body. And that suggests if I don't want this to be tortured, it's because I believe in the body theory of personal identity. Follow the body, not follow the personality. Even though he swapped our personalities, it's still me he's torturing. That's the intuition I've got when I think about Bernard Williams's second case. Now, we're in a bit of a pickle here from the philosophical point of view, because when we thought about the first case, the intuition seemed to be, personality is the key to personal identity. But when we thought about the second case, the intuition seems to be, body is the key to personal identity. That's bad. Right? Two different cases give us two different diametrically opposed answers on the very same question. One sec. And it's worse still, of course, if you don't share the intuitions that I just, I was being honest with you, those really are my intuitions when I think about these cases. If you're with me, you're in a philosophical problem. If you're not with me, if you didn't have the same intuitions, then maybe you don't have a problem, but I've got a problem. And it's worse still, because it's not really, if we're careful and think about it, it's not really as though we have two different cases and intuitively we want to give different answers to those two different cases. Really, all we've got there is just one case. It's the very same case, the very same story that I told two different times. In both cases, before the torturing goes in, there's Shelley Kagan's body over here with Linda's personality. And there's Linda's body over here with Shelley Kagan's personality. And we're asking, which one do you want to be tortured? It's the very same setup. I just emphasize different elements in a way to sort of manipulate your intuitions. But if it's the very same case, it can't be that in one of them follow the body and in the other one follow personality. So it's very hard to know what moral should we draw. The appeal to intuition, thinking about these cases, doesn't seem to take us very far. There was a question back there. Yeah?
I think couldn't you still have your same intuitions and argue that in the first case, Linda's body has a brain that's physically more similar to your brain than your body has, and therefore, couldn't you take that intuition and say that it argues for the body theory? That in hardwiring your personality onto Linda's brain, you make physical changes in Linda's brain that make it more similar to your brain than the brain that's sitting over in your body.
Nice suggestion. So the suggestion was this: when the mad scientist put my personality, Shelley Kagan personality, onto Linda's body, he had to modify Linda's brain. And in modifying Linda's brain, this was the question that was just raised, hasn't he actually made that brain more like Shelley Kagan's brain than Linda's brain? And if that's right, shouldn't we say, remember, the best form of the body view, I argued previously, was the brain version. So if this is really Shelley Kagan's brain over here, then this isn't the problem for the body view. We were deceived when we said the body view said, this is Shelley Kagan. Really, the body view, to it, the best version of the body view, that is the brain version, now has to say, oh, we moved Shelley's brain and put it here. Well, if you're prepared to say that, then indeed you will be able to say, yeah, it's the body view. The body view says, do it to this one. Rather, don't do it to this one because this is Shelley Kagan. I don't actually find myself, though, inclined to agree with you that this has become Shelley Kagan's brain. If you ask me, where's Shelley Kagan's legs? They're still here. Where's Shelley Kagan's heart? They're still here. Where's Shelley Kagan's brain? It's still here. Right? It's not as though what the scientists did was open up my skull, take the brain out. At least, if that's the way you're imagining it, don't imagine that. This is all electronic transfer. It's not as though he took the brain out and literally